Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Om Parameshvara. Om. Om Namah Shivaya. Okay. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome back. Nice to see you. Also welcome to all of our students watching online. We will continue our study of Chapter 8 today. We'll begin with some chanting, starting with verse 12. Yes. And as always, be sure to look at the meaning as I recite and then repeat after me. Correct. Sarvadvarani samyamya, sarvadvarani samyamya, manohridi nirudhya cha, manohridi nirudhya cha, murdhyadhayatmanah pranam, murdhyadhayatmanah pranam, Astito yoga dharanam, astito yoga dharanam, yad. I went the wrong way. There we go. Omit yekaksharam brahma, omit yekaksharam brahma, vyaharan mamup anusmaran. Vyaharan mamanusmaran yah prayati tyajan deham yah prayati tyajan deham yaya sayati paramam gatam sayati paramam gatam ananya cheta satatam ananya cheta satatam Yo mam smarati nityashaha, yo mam smarati nityashaha, tasyaham sulabha partha, tasyaham sulabha partha, nityayuktasya yoginaha, nityayuktasya yoginaha, mamupetya punarjanma, Mamupetya punar duhkalayama shashvatam duhkalayama shashvatam napnuvanti mahatmanaha napnuvanti mahatmanaha samsiddhim paramam gataha samsiddhim paramam gataha Abrahma bhuvana lokaha, Abrahma bhuvana lokaha, punaravarti norjuna, punaravarti norjuna, mamupetya tu kaunteya, mamupetya tu kaunteya, punarjanmana vidyate, punarjanmana vidyate, Sahasrayuga paryantam, Sahasrayuga paryantam aharyad brahmano viduhu aharyad brahmano viduhu ratram yuga sahasrantam ratram yuga sahasrantam teho ratra vidojanaha teho ratra vidojanaha avyaktat vyaktaya sarvaha avyaktat vyaktaya sarvaha prabhavantyah ragame ratragame pralihante ratragame pralihante tatraiva vyakta sanyake tatraiva vyakta sangyake. You can see our next subject matter, but we will return to where we left off. You'll remember that in this chapter, Arjuna opens the chapter with several questions. The last question of which was how to reach you, O Krishna, at the end of one's life through meditation. And in response to that, we had some discussion. I won't get back into the discussion about whatever is in your mind at the last moment of death. We discussed that at some length. But the outcome of that is there are two ways to reach Sri Krishna. According to Sri Krishna in this chapter, you have two choices in terms of how to reach Sri Krishna at the end of your life with the help of meditation. One way is to spend your entire life engaged in meditation, other forms of spiritual practice, including these teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, teachings of Vedanta. And through all of that sadhana, you will definitely be enlightened at the end of your life. Option one. Option two, suppose there are people who, are you a procrastinator? Many people are. Put things off. And many people put off their spiritual practice. You know, say, oh, I'm just in my 20s and 30s. It's too young for me to take to spiritual practice. Then, oh, I'm just in my 40s and 50s. I'm too young. Then, oh, I'm just in my 60s and 70s. I'm too young. This is procrastination. By the way, a very important point here, and that is spiritual practice is meant to improve the quality of your life. So what's the point of putting it off until the end of your life? That orientation reflects a very narrow conception of the goal of spiritual life. Many people very narrowly think that the goal of spiritual life is not to be reborn, to merge with Brahman at the end of your life, which is absolutely true, but they're missing out on the other aspect, the other goal to be achieved through spiritual growth, and it's called Jivan Mukti, being mukta, being freed from suffering, Jivan, while you're still alive. To live the remainder of your life without a trace of suffering. Does that sound like a goal worth perceiving? Of course. Then why in the world put it off to the very end of your life? Anyway, as I said, those who subscribe to that idea, oh, I'll do it at the end of my life, those people are ignoring the fact that spiritual growth can be a tremendous blessing throughout your life, not only at the end of your life. So, coming back to our introduction, we said there are two approaches to reaching Krishna at the end of your life. One is to live a life of sadhana so that you are enlightened at the end of your life. And the other is for the procrastinators. Actually, that's not accurate. In fact, it's not accurate at all. Because we said in the prior classes, the other approach is for great yogis great yogis who can manage to engage in a very profound practice of meditation in their dying moments. Those yogis are certainly not procrastinators, because to achieve that degree of yogic discipline is going to require not years of practice, but probably decades of prior practice to prepare you for those dying moments. In those dying moments, Sri Krishna prescribes a meditation practice. So we saw that in the final verse. Om et yeksharam brahma vyaharan. Chanting Om with your dying breath. Ma manusmara. Meditating on me, on Sri Krishna. Yah prayati tyajandeham. They reach that supreme goal through this process of meditation. In the prior verses, Sri Krishna has described it in some detail. As I said, to have that strength of mind and ability to meditate in your dying moments seems to me to be pretty extraordinary and something that many of us may not be able to achieve. I don't think I could possibly achieve that. Which means, of the two approaches, to spend a lifetime in meditation or to prepare for this intense meditation at the end of your life, it seems that the prior form, the prior approach, is more suitable for most people, unless you happen to be a great yogi. If you're a great yogi, as they say in American English, go for it. Okay. Now, let's proceed. Ananya cheta satatam, ananya cheta satatam, yo mam smarati nityashaha, yo mam smarati nityashaha, tasyaham sulabha partha, tasyaham sulabha partha, nitya yuktasya yoginaha, nitya yuktasya yoginaha. Yo yaha, that yo is yaha, one who, mam smarati. Smarati literally means remember, but as we discussed in our prior classes, Sri Krishna consistently uses that verb, smra, the verbal root, to remember. He uses it throughout this chapter in the sense of meditation. So don't get misled. It literally means to remember, but in this context, it absolutely means to meditate. So yaha mam smarati, one who meditates on me. How? Nityashaha, always. In fact, he says that again in the first line, end. Satatam, continually. Always, continually meditating on me. Who are those? Who is it? Ananya chetaha, one whose chetas, whose mind is ananya, has nothing else to be focused on. Nothing else to be focused on means one whose mind is fixed on Sri Krishna and nothing else. For such a person, now, which of the two approaches is Sri Krishna referring to here? It could be either, could it not? So one who constantly meditates on me could refer to how you live your whole life, a life of sadhana, a life of spiritual practice, a life of meditation. Or it could also refer to that great yogi who engages in this intense meditation practice in their dying moments. So tasya, for such a person, in the third line, and in the fourth line, for whom nitya yuktasya yoginaha. Tasya yoginaha, for that yogi. And again, yogi could mean that great yogi with a disciplined meditation practice, but if you meditate every day, by definition, you're a yogi. If you practice karma yoga every day, by definition, you're a yogi. If you pray every day, you are a yogi. Yogi means one engaged in spiritual practice, so don't have a narrow idea of this. So tasya yoginaha, for that spiritual practitioner who is nitya yukta, who is constantly engaged. It's a very powerful word. Nitya yukta, always engaged. And again, it could refer to that great yogi at the end of life. It can equally refer to you every day. Nitya, nitya yukta, always engaged. Always engaged in spiritual practice means continually through your whole life. We had a discussion at the very beginning of this chapter that we don't know when our lives will come to an end. So if we want to be prepared for death, you should spend your entire life engaged in spiritual practice. That's what Sri Krishna is emphasizing in this chapter, the necessity to be continually engaged in spiritual practice. That doesn't mean not going to work, because as we discussed way back in chapters 2 and 3, going to work can also be a spiritual practice if you're practicing karma yoga. So always engaged in spiritual practice. Tasya, for that person, aham, I, Sri Krishna says, I, sulabhaha, I am easily obtained. Partha, O Arjuna, son of Kunti, I am easily obtained for nitya yuktasya yoginaha, for that spiritual practitioner who is continually engaged. I am easily. He uses that word sulabha, easy. Which do you think he's referring to? That great yogi practicing this intense practice at the end of one's life, or is he referring to how you live your entire life engaged in spiritual practice? It could refer to either, but which seems easier to you? This is the point. How easy will it be to ensure that your mind is sharp and focused and engaged in deep meditation as you breathe out your final breath? That may not be easy. The other one is definitely easy. To live a life of spiritual practice is not only easy, it's delightful. After all, as we said, it improves the quality of your life. Who doesn't want a life that is increasingly free from suffering? That's the whole point of spiritual growth, is to be increasingly free from suffering as you live your life. Okay. Mamupetya punarjanma, mamupetya punarjanma, dukkhalayama shashvatam, dukkhalayama shashvatam, napnuvanti mahatmanaha, napnuvanti mahatmanaha, samsiddhim paramam gataha, samsiddhim paramam gataha. Start in a third line. Mahatmanaha, plural. Those Mahatmas. And Mahatma here is not restricted to Karamchand Gandhi, his given name. He was a Mahatma without doubt, but here Mahatma used in a more general sense of anyone who is how can we say, an advanced spiritual practitioner. How's that? An advanced spiritual practitioner, one who has followed these spiritual teachings and gained enlightenment. That's the goal of this spiritual path, is enlightenment. And as we said, enlightenment, two aspects. One is freedom of suffering now, while you're alive. And second is freedom from suffering after this life is over. In fact, let me just expand on that, because it introduces this verse and this next topic. So if your spiritual practice frees you from suffering in this life and you die, and then if you get reborn, if you're reborn, you're subject to suffering again. Therefore, there's a second aspect to enlightenment. Enlightenment means, let me use the word moksha, since Sri Krishna is going to use that word. Moksha literally means liberation, freedom. And we said freedom from suffering now and freedom from suffering in the after. After now means after this life. So freedom from suffering now and freedom from rebirth, so that you're not subject to suffering in future lives. So we differentiate, especially in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta, we differentiate Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti. Mukti, liberation. Jivan Mukti, to be liberated while alive. Videha Mukti, to be liberated, videha, in the absence of your physical body after death. Means to be freed from rebirth. And Sri Krishna now is shifting to the latter perspective. After all, this whole chapter deals with death. Not almost the whole chapter deals with death. So he's going to focus now on Videha Mukti, on being free from rebirth, so that you're never subject to suffering in any future birth. So Mahatmanaha, those enlightened ones, na apnuvanti. They do not gain, go up to the first line now. They do not gain punar janma, rebirth. They are not born again. Mam upetya. Upetya, having reached Mam, Sri Krishna says. And he uses this language throughout this chapter. He will use the word moksha, I think. Actually, he doesn't use the word moksha. I use the word moksha. He continually says Mam. Mamupetya, having reached me. That's his code word for moksha, and that'll become very clear as we continue. So when Sri Krishna says, having reached me, he is speaking of himself as the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to reach moksha. So having reached me, Sri Krishna says in several verses, it means having reached moksha. Mamupetya, having reached me, having reached moksha, punarjanma na apnuvanti. They do not gain rebirth. They are not subject to rebirth. And constantly people ask, well, what's so bad about getting born? Well, Sri Krishna makes it very clear in the second line, because to be born is to be born into dukkhalayam, into a realm of suffering. Now, this life that we live is not only suffering. We have both sukha and dukkha. We have both pleasure and pain. But one thing is true, you can't live in this world without suffering. Suffering is an intrinsic part of the human condition. So then you might argue, well, wait a minute, suppose I'm reborn into heaven, which is our next topic. If you're reborn into heaven, our definition of heaven is a lifetime free from suffering. Not bad. To live a life free from suffering is wonderful, but then he says, ashashvatam, it is not eternal. And I'm going to hold off on explaining this because he explains it in the very next verse. Even if you get to heaven, your period of being free from suffering is not eternal. You get reborn from heaven. You get born into heaven, and then you get born again and again and again and again. The idea of eternal heaven is a biblical idea. It's not present in the Hindu tradition. We'll talk about that more in the very next verse. So those enlightened ones are not subject to rebirth into a life of suffering as a human being or some other being, nor are they subject to rebirth even into heaven, which is temporary, as we'll see in the next verse. And how is that? Those enlightened ones are, in the last line, samsiddhim paramam gataha. Those enlightened beings, gataha, have reached have reached what? Samsiddhim, perfection. Paramam samsiddhim, absolute perfection. Another expression to describe moksha. And moksha, as we said, is a condition in which you are utterly free from suffering in this life, and also free from rebirth, so that you are never subject to suffering in any later birth. And in that moksha, just to add a little bit, to make it clear that moksha is not freedom from suffering is a negative definition. Freedom from rebirth is a negative definition, and we tend to use this negative language when describing moksha because that's the language of our scriptures, and it's meaningful, but let's not overlook the other side of the coin, so to speak. Freedom from suffering means what? A state of perfect contentment, a state of perfect peace, a state of complete fulfillment, a state of being utterly non-separate from Ishvara, God of the cosmos. So we can easily put positive words to describe moksha. Moksha literally means freedom, so it has fundamentally a negative meaning: freedom from suffering, freedom from rebirth. But let's not forget, it is the attainment of a state of complete contentment, peace, fulfillment. I won't say, many people like to use a state of bliss, and I think my guru has pounded into my head, so to speak, not to use that word bliss. And this was a big issue for him because bliss is a mental condition which comes and goes. When I eat chocolate ice cream, I experience bliss. But how long does that chocolate ice cream bliss last? Not very long. So Pujya Swamiji was very adamant about not using the word bliss. I'll just share with you a quick anecdote about why he was so adamant about it. He was in Rishikesh in the late 1960s when all the hippies from Europe and America traveled to India. Many of them landed in Rishikesh. Rishikesh was famous that Mahesh Yogi was, well, in fact, his ashram, the ashram of Mahesh Yogi, the founder of Transcendental Meditation, his ashram was just across the river from Pujya Swamiji's ashram. You can see the ashram just looking across the river. So Rishikesh was famous in those days, in the late 60s. Some of you know the famous Beatles went to that Mahesh Yogi ashram in the 1960s. Anyway, famous. So Rishikesh drew all these hippies from Europe and United States, and many of them landed in Pujya Swamiji's ashram on the other side of the river, and they kept asking Pujya Swamiji, how can we attain bliss? So apparently, and this is Pujya Swamiji's explanation, these hippies had been using drugs to achieve bliss, and now they're looking for a drug-free method of attaining the same kind of bliss. Well, Pujya Swamiji was very much against that approach to spiritual life. That's really not what spiritual life is. Not substituting for drug use. It's not, to attain that bliss. So this is what I think those experiences in the late 1960s, I think, predisposed Pujya Swamiji to avoid using this word bliss. Now you know why. If you observe, I won't use the word bliss except in this negative way, because it is a transient mental experience. It comes and goes. Moksha is not a transient condition. Therefore, to call moksha a state of bliss is a huge mistake. Okay, enough said. Let's continue. Abrahma bhuvana lokaha, Abrahma bhuvana lokaha, punaravarti norjuna, punaravarti norjuna, mamupetya tu kaunteya, mamupetya tu kaunteya, punarjanmana vidyate, punarjanmana vidyate. Brahma bhuvanat lokaha, Brahma bhuvanan, Brahma bhuvana lokaha, punaravarti norjuna, plural. Lokaha. I'm working on the grammar. Okay. So he says that lokaha, all worlds, and specifically worlds that you can be reborn into. You can be reborn into this Manushya Loka, this world of people. You could be reborn into some animal world. You could be reborn into a heavenly world. Brahma Bhuvanat. So Brahma Bhuvana, Brahma Loka is said to be the highest of the heavens. There are references in Puranic scriptures to 7 levels of heaven, 7 heavenly domains, 7 heavenly realms, and the highest of those 7 heavens is called Brahmaloka. So he says, from all of the worlds, all of the possible rebirths, up to and including the highest heaven, second line, Punar avartinaha, Arjuna. O Arjuna, they are Punar avartinaha. Avartin is that from which you return. Avarta is returning. So avartinaha, from those lokas, you return, punaha, again. So whatever loka you are born into, whether you're born into an animal loka, a human loka, or some heavenly loka, all of those lokas come to an end. And here we see that in this Hindu tradition, heaven is not conceived of as an eternal condition, nor is hell conceived of as an eternal condition. We find this thinking prevalent in biblical traditions, and it's actually logically defective. And when I say logically defective, I'm not criticizing the Bible, I'm not criticizing biblical traditions, I am criticizing the logic behind eternal heaven and hell. What is the logical defect? For your finite good deeds that you commit in this life, do you deserve eternal heaven? I'll say that again. For your finite good deeds that you commit in this life, when you die, do you deserve an eternity in heaven? Similarly, for your harmful deeds, adharmic deeds that you commit in this life, no matter how many you commit, does it merit eternity in hell? To merit eternity in hell, you should have committed an infinite number of bad deeds, adharmic deeds in this life, and no matter how vile a person's life is, it's not possible to commit an infinite number of adharmic deeds. So this is my point. The idea of eternal heaven and eternal hell are logically defective. And again, this isn't a criticism of the Bible or biblical traditions. It's a criticism of the logic of eternal heaven and hell. Doesn't make sense. So in Hindu tradition, based on your finite good deeds, you go to heaven for a finite length of time. Based on your finite bad deeds, adharmic deeds, you suffer in hell for a finite length of time. And just to finish this topic, heaven and hell are not necessarily locations. Heaven and hell are better understood as lifetimes. Heaven is a lifetime free from suffering. Hell is a lifetime free from enjoyment. How's that for very simple definitions? A lifetime of pure suffering is hell. A lifetime of pure enjoyment is heaven. Can you have pure enjoyment in this life? No. Can you have pure suffering in this life? I don't think so, as a human being. So the human condition is generally considered to be a mishra, a combination of sukha and dukkha, pleasure and suffering. But to be born in a condition where you experience no suffering, such a life would be a heavenly life, but it would be finite in duration. And to be born in a life in which you experience nothing but suffering, such a lifetime we would understand as being a hell, but that hell also would be finite in duration. On the other hand, in the third line, Mamu Petya to Kaunteya. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti Arjuna, Mamu Petya, Sri Krishna uses the exact words again, having reached me. And having reached me is the language he's choosing to use for reaching moksha. He's used that word before, the expression in a prior verse. Paramam siddhim. He used that expression. Absolute perfection, the highest state, the highest condition. So having reached me, O Arjuna, having gained liberation, having gained moksha, punarjanma na vidyate. There is no rebirth. And this is a little bit tricky in the doctrine of karma. I hadn't thought to describe it here in this class. But this is a question that comes up frequently. By the way, if you have questions about the doctrine of karma, which includes rebirth and going to heaven and hell, I have a number of videos on YouTube with all of this explained. If you go through these videos, you will understand very clearly. But one topic that's not discussed in that series of videos and comes up frequently is how do you become utterly free from rebirth? Rebirth is driven by unfructified karmas. Actions have been committed, and the laws of the universe want to ensure that once an action has been committed, its result must take place. And if you commit actions and then I'm being silly. If you commit some actions and then very inconveniently die, then you prevent the laws of nature from discharging the deeds you've committed without giving time for the results to occur. So the laws of nature and the laws of karma ensure that for whatever deeds you've committed in this lifetime, if you have failed to live long enough to receive the results, that leads to rebirth. And if you understand the doctrine of karma fully, or if you've gone through my series of videos, you understand that in each life, we leave behind some unfructified karmas. How many? Okay, we don't know how many, but some. Some unfructified karmas are left behind in this life. Some unfructified karmas were left behind in your prior life, and the life before that, and the life before that. How many prior lives have you had according to the doctrine of karma, and again, you can watch the videos, you'll understand, we live in a cyclic universe, which Sri Krishna is going to talk about shortly. And in that cyclic universe, you have been reborn again and again. In a cyclic universe, you have been reborn an infinite number of times. There was no first birth for an individual. In fact, a first birth would be a logical impossibility because you're born because of karma. First birth implies no karma. If there's no karma, how could you get born? The whole doctrine of karma is based on an infinite series of births. And this stretches our minds because unless you're a mathematician, you're not used to dealing with infinities. Mathematicians deal with it all the time. In math, it's a common thing. But in human experience, it's hard for us to appreciate that idea of an infinite cycle of life and death, an infinite number of prior births. If you can begin to appreciate that, then that leads to the next step in our discussion, and that is, if in each life you leave behind a little bit of unfructified good karma and unfructified bad karma, then in an infinite number of prior lives, how much of that leftover unfructified good karma and bad karma have you accumulated over an infinite number of prior lives? You've accumulated an infinite amount of karma. Good news, an infinite amount of good karma. Bad news, an infinite amount of papa, bad karma. Now, and we call this infinite accumulation of karma, we have a technical term for it, we call it sanchita karma. Sanchita means collected, accumulated. So you possess an infinite amount of unfructified good and bad karma called sanchita karma. This life is due to a small, tiny portion of that karma, a tiny portion of karma enough to keep you going for 80, 90, or 100 years. That much karma. And that portion of karma we call prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma is karma which has begun to fructify, karma which has caused this birth, karma which contributes to your experiences throughout your life, and when that prarabdha karma is exhausted, this life comes to an end. But then, all that sanchita karma is waiting to give rise to next life, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. How many lives would it take to exhaust an infinite amount of karma? You know math well enough. It would take we have an answer to that question. To exhaust an infinite accumulation of karma would require an infinite number of lives. We have a precise answer for that question, but it's also not very helpful. So how can you possibly become free from rebirth? Not through karma kshaya, not through exhaustion of karmas. Through karma kshaya, through the exhaustion of prior karmas, you can never, ever achieve freedom from rebirth because of the infinite nature of your sanchita karma. Then, how is it possible to be freed from all this karma? The scriptures describe it in various ways. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna refers to all of your prior karmas being burnt. It's a metaphor. Karmas don't get burnt, they get exhausted. So what does that mean for all your karmas to be burnt? And here's a way of understanding how you can become free from an infinite number. Well, I've told this story before. If you've heard this before, I apologize, but I made up this story to describe how you become free from infinite number of karmas. Take Bill Gates, one of the richest people on the world, on the planet. Suppose he wants to get rid of all of his money. I think he got rid of, bad joke, he got rid of half of his money when he got divorced. But the half that remains is still a lot. So if Bill Gates wants to get rid of the rest of his money, suppose he starts writing checks. And each check is for, I just have to work out the numbers in my head. Each check, let's see, 1,000, yeah, fine. Each check is for $1 million. And he writes out one check per day. Every day he writes out a check for $1 million. He has so much money, he won't exhaust his wealth by the time he dies, writing a $1 million check every day. This is a story, a metaphor to describe. What I'm saying is the gradual exhaustion of his wealth could not free him from all his wealth in this lifetime. You can see where I'm going with this. The gradual exhaustion of karma in a given lifetime is simply not possible. Now, to finish the story, there will be a time when Bill Gates is instantly freed from all of his wealth, instantly separated from all of his wealth, instantly deprived of all of his wealth. When is that moment? The moment he dies. Now watch this. When he dies, does the wealth cease to exist? No. But when he dies, his ownership of the wealth comes to an end. Clearly. This is a very helpful metaphor. I find it very helpful. I actually struggled with this particular teaching, and it became very clear with the help of this kind of metaphor. It's not the destruction of karma so much as it is the loss of ownership of the karma. You can't destroy there are scriptures which say you can destroy this infinite amount of karma. I find it difficult to understand. I find this very easy to understand, this approach. And that is, you become free from the ownership of that sanchita karma. Now watch this. Sanchita karma belongs to whoever did the deed. The doer of the action is the one to whom the karma belongs, obviously. The one who commits an action is an unenlightened jiva, individual person. When that unenlightened person is destroyed in the fire of knowledge, when your individuality is destroyed in the fire of knowledge, when your individual ego, ahankara, is destroyed in the fire of knowledge, your ownership of that infinite accumulation of karma comes to an end. To me, this is a helpful way of understanding that you become free from rebirth, not by exhausting an infinite amount of karma. You become free from rebirth by losing your ownership of that karma. The individual jiva, individual person, is metaphorically destroyed by the fire of knowledge. The ahankara, the individual ego, is destroyed. Your ownership of that karma is destroyed. In this way, you become freed from rebirth. If that sanchita karma remains, that sanchita karma acts upon the individual person to ensure that that individual person, the sukshma sharira, the subtle body, which detaches itself at death and travels on, that accumulation of karma with the laws of karma, the laws of nature, ensure that that sukshma sharira finds its way to another body and continues to reap the results of actions committed in prior lives. So the law of karma functions according to that sanchita karma unless you have lost ownership. You're detached. Your ownership of that sanchita karma is cut. Okay, enough said. Now, to introduce the next series of verses, Sri Krishna is going to take a big step here. He's talking about moksha. He uses the word upetya mam upetya, having reached me. Well, having reached me is not like having reached Jersey City. So Jersey City is a half an hour drive up the road. Having reached Sri Krishna is a very different kind of journey. A journey which transcends the world, a journey which even transcends the heavens. So to reach Sri Krishna is to transcend the world and even to transcend the heavens. So now Sri Krishna is taking a big leap of perspective. We need to understand what it is to reach Sri Krishna. We have to understand this transcendental perspective, a perspective which is beyond the world, which is beyond the heavens. And in the next series of verses, he's going to give us a 3-verse lesson in Puranic cosmology. I need to explain that expression. Cosmology is the study of the cosmos, how the universe comes into existence. And in the Purana scriptures, there are many, many references to how the universe gets created. Science tells us that the universe began with a big bang some 14 billion years ago. That's scientific cosmology. Now we're going to get a 3-verse lesson in Puranic cosmology. Let's begin. I don't know if we'll finish, but we'll start. Starting here. Sahasrayuga paryantam, Sahasrayuga paryantam, aharyad brahmano viduhu, aharyad brahmano viduhu, ratram yuga sahasrantam, ratram yuga sahasrantam, teho ratra vido janaha, teho ratra vido janaha. Before I take you through the verse, let's just refer to a story from the Puranas, which is being referred to here by Sri Krishna. The story is Mahavishnu is laying on his Ananta Shesha Shayana, his bed made of this snake. He is laying on his snake bed at the bottom of the Milky Ocean. This is Puranas. But Puranas, we can call it mythology if you like that word. If you don't like that word, don't use the word mythology. Anyway, these are the stories told by the Puranas to communicate great truths. Lord Mahavishnu lying on the bottom of the Milky Ocean, sound asleep, and not sound asleep, he's just laying there. He's not asleep. He's just laying there. And from his navel emerges a lotus. That lotus opens, And sitting in the middle of that lotus is Brahmaji, the creator of the universe. This is very, you can call it fanciful, you can call it mythological, you can call it symbolic, but you can't call it silly, because it's full of meaning. You know, there are some people who look at these stories and they say, how ridiculous is that? If you understand the symbolism. Here, look at the symbolism. Brahmaji is a creator. And in the view of the Puranas, the creator is not even the absolute reality. The creator is an emanation from the absolute reality. The absolute reality here represented by Mahavishnu. If you want to get into a very Vedantic interpretation of the symbolism, Mahavishnu represents Brahman. Pure existence, pure consciousness, limitless, the foundation because of which everything and anything exists. Brahmaji is an emanation from that fundamental reality. Brahmaji represents Ishvara, creator, sustainer, destroyer of the world. So don't look at these stories and call them silly. You have to go deeply and understand their symbolism. On the other hand, I use the word mythology, and to me the word mythology is okay because it says that these are non-historical stories. So we make a difference between history and mythology. History are things that occurred in the timeline of creation. So was there a time when that lotus emerged from Mahavishnu's navel? Was there a particular date that the lotus emerged? There's another perspective which is called ahistorical, non-historical. So non-historical means it didn't occur according to that timeline. It's more symbolic in meaning. And we frequently use the word mythology. Some people object to this word mythology, and that's okay, because to call these Puranic scriptures mythological, to some people mythological means silly and fanciful. Not to me. To me, mythological means full of symbolism and important teachings. So if you think mythology means silly, naive, and trivial, then don't use the word mythological. But for me, to call it mythological means ahistorical. It's not part of that timeline. That emergence of the lotus didn't occur on a particular date in that timeline, but rather this depiction of the lotus emerging from Lord Vishnu's navel is, to me, highly symbolic. And symbolic, as I said, specifically of Mahavishnu representing Brahman, absolute reality, that the lotus you can make out as Maya, Maya coming forth, and in the midst of that Maya is Brahmaji representing Ishvara. So you can find all this profound meaning in that story. Okay, so back to the story. So Lord Brahmaji, he is sitting in the middle of the lotus, sound asleep. Finally, he wakes up. He wakes up after 100 years. He wakes up. In those 100 years, while he's asleep, the universe is in a state of dissolution. The universe is in a state in which it is unmanifest. We've talked before, in fact, we had that discussion about karma as that creative principle. At the very beginning of this chapter, the universe does not come from nothing. The universe comes from a seed condition, an avyakta avyakta avastha. An avastha, a condition in which the universe exists in an unmanifest, avyakta condition, like a tree exists in a seed. So that seed is a product from the previous tree. The universe in an unmanifest condition is a product of the prior universe. When the prior universe became unmanifest, it left behind this seed for the next universe. That seed has existed, the universe has existed in an unmanifest condition for 100 years in the life of Brahma. 100 years of Brahma's life is billions of years for us. I don't know how many billions. In fact, different Puranas give different interpretations of these time spans. So I don't want to get into details. Some Puranas have certain numbers, other Puranas have other numbers. Anyway, 100 years for Brahmaji is millions or billions of years. Finally, Brahmaji opens his eyes, wakes up. And when Brahmaji wakes up, the unmanifest universe becomes manifest. Brahmaji is understood as creator. And Brahmaji is awake. He's awake for 100 years. And being awake for 100 years represents one cycle of creation, one kalpa. And 100 years of Brahmaji is however many millions and billions of years for us. And then after 100 years of being awake, he goes asleep again. And he sleeps for another 100 years. He's awake for another 100 years, asleep for 100 years. You get the idea. This leads to this story, this symbolic representation leads to this understanding of the universe being cyclic, going through periods of manifestation and dissolution, periods in which the universe is present in a physical way, and periods of time in which the universe is present in a seed condition. And Sri Krishna refers to this cyclic universe and the story in this verse. He says, start in the second line. Yat ahar yat brahmanaha, the yat brahmanaha ahar, brahmanaha, of Brahmaji, ahar is day. So he says 1 day in the life of Brahma is, in the first line, sahasra yuga paryantam. 1 day in the life of Brahma, paryantam, extends for sahasra yuga, thousands of yugas. And yugas are another measure of time. Kalpa is a whole cycle of creation. Yuga is a portion of that cycle of creation. So 1 day of Brahma. In fact, instead of 100 years, we'll follow what Sri Krishna is saying. 100 years is one presentation. We'll take it, as Sri Krishna says, 1 day. So 1 day in the life of Brahma lasts for thousands of eons, and during that day of Brahma, the universe is manifest, as he's going to say in the next verse. Ratram ratra yuga sahasrantam. So yat brahmanaha, second line, for Brahmaji, his ratram, his night, 1 night in the life of Brahma, yuga sahasrantam, lasts also for thousands of yugas, billions of years. 1 day of Brahma extends for thousands of years. 1 night of Brahmaji extends for thousands of years. How do we know this? Te, in the last line, te aho ratra vidaha janaha. And at the end of the third line, second line, viduhu, they know. Who knows? Viduhu, they know. Who knows? Last line, te, they know. Who are they? Te janaha, those people. What kind of people? Those people who, aho ratra vit, those people who know day and night. Those people who know what is one day and night of Brahma, they know that a day of Brahma extends for thousands of yugas, a night of Brahma extends for thousands of yugas. They know. Who are they? The rishis and great saints from whom we receive the Puranas. The Puranas are these collections of stories. I might call them mythological stories, but again, not to make them sound silly or unreal, but to say they are collections of non-historical stories. In fact, maybe I should stop using the word mythological because it rubs people the wrong way. Non-historical stories. The Puranas contain collections of non-historical stories. The Puranas, these scriptures, there are 18 Mahapuranas. They are attributed to the sage Vyasa. They could not possibly have been written by one human being because they go to many hundreds of thousands of verses. Not many. Several hundreds of thousands of verses are found in the 18 Mahapuranas. Then there are 18 Upa-Puranas, secondary Puranas. In all of these Puranas, we find all of these ahistorical stories which contain this profound symbolism. And I'd like to bring out this symbolism properly. It comes out in these 3 verses. Since we're at the end of this class, this isn't the right time to push ahead with that symbolism. So when we meet next time, we'll return to this Puranic cosmology, and we'll get this big picture, a picture that is beyond the world, beyond the heavens, and from this perspective we can understand what Sri Krishna says what he means when he says, Mam upetya, having reached me, having gone beyond the world, having gone beyond the heavens. What does it mean to reach Sri Krishna? We'll see that when we meet next week. 2 brief announcements. One is I'm finally preparing a new video. This is really quite I've worked on this really hard. A video which deals with this conundrum. The teachings of Advaita Vedanta say that the world is not absolutely real. Brahman is absolutely real. The world is only apparently real. So the question comes, why does this apparently real world, it seems so real? How do we reconcile our experience of the world, which seems very real? How do we reconcile it with the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, which say that the world is not absolutely real? So this new video will deal with that particular question. It's almost ready for publication. It'll be uploaded in maybe Monday or so. Monday or Tuesday, you can find that new video. If you subscribe to the YouTube channel, then you'll be informed when it is uploaded and available. Other announcement is tomorrow, Sunday, we have satsang, question answer time. If you have questions, please join us here at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And we'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kavingavinam Upamashravastumam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspataha Nashranvan Hutavasira Sadhanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Om.